Hello folks, and welcome to this lesson on flowers. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the different tissues in flowers and also understand the difference between complete and incomplete flowers. So as you go through with your life, you may have noticed that flowers can look very, very different from each other. And flowers can actually be so different that different parts that they have can also be different. Some of them can be missing something, some of them have more of some other things, and so on and so forth. The picture and the structures that I'm going through are going to be very, very generalized, and they certainly are not going to look the same in every single type of flower. So one of the most recognizable features that we're going to go through first is this, the petal. So you can see this petal, that's sort of the outer layer that you see when a flower has bloomed, and these petals are generally used as attraction methods. They have colors, or they have scents that attract other pollinators to them. That being said, not all plants use pollinators to have reproduction happening. And so in some cases, you're going to find that with flowers or plants that don't use pollinators, these petals are not going to be as developed, or they're not going to be as showy as it is with some other flowers. Now, another key part in this particular flower is this. This is referred to as a sepal. And they might look a little bit like petals because they are sort of shaped that way. But the role of a sepal is when the flower is still in a bud, so before the flower has bloomed, the sepal is what covers and protects the flower and everything that's inside of it. Then we have this structure at the bottom, which is a stem. The stem is what connects the flower to the rest of the plant. And though there is no particular label for this, that part, which is sort of between the stem and the sepal, is referred to as a receptacle. This receptacle might not be very important in certain plants, but in other plants it is actually very important. A lot of the times when you're eating fruit, you might think that you're eating this part of the flower, so sort of the ovary part of the flower. But no, in some cases it's actually the receptacle, which is what draws other animals or other things that are going to disperse the seeds after pollination happens. One case of this happening is apples. When you're eating apples, you're not eating the ovary or any part inside this flower, but you're actually eating an overgrowth of the receptacle. So the receptacle grows and grows and grows and covers the other parts of what used to be the flower before pollination happens. So from here, let's get into the actual sexual reproduction side of those tissues, and we're going to talk about these things first. These things, as a whole, are referred to as stamen, and they are the male reproductive structures of the flower. Now, the stamen can be divided into two parts. This part, which is referred to as the anther, and this part, which is referred to as a filament. The anther is where the pollen, or the sperm, if you want to use more animal terms, where the sperm of the plant is stored, and the filament is what holds the anther. There are a lot of cases in which you do want a filament to be longer or shorter for pollination reasons, and so that's why you do need a separate filament and not just an anther sort of sitting at the base of the flower itself. And so that leaves us with this central structure, which are the female reproductive tissues of a plant. Those are, as a whole, referred to as the pistil. There are many different parts to the pistil. You have the stigma at the top. This is where the pollen lands. And then you have this, which is a style. Note that the pronunciation is not the usual English pronunciation of this particular spelling. You might have a longer style for various reasons, like making sure that it is exposed to the outside where it can get pollinated a lot more easily. And then you have this part, which is the ovary, which holds these little things, which are ovules. Those are the actual eggs. The ovules are the eggs. They become the seeds after fertilization has happened, and the ovary is what holds the ovules in there. In some cases, after fertilization happens, the fruit that you get developing can be the ovary, or, as I mentioned before, the fruit that other animals like ourselves eat can be the receptacle, or something else as well. Now, as I mentioned, flowers can look very, very different, and they can have different parts to them. So there are some terms that can refer to these differences in flowers. One of these terms, or one of these sets of terms, are complete and incomplete flowers. Complete flowers are flowers that have all of the tissues that I mentioned before. So they have petals and sepals and pistils and stamens. So they do have both male and female reproductive tissues, and they also have petals and sepals. Whereas in some cases, you have your incomplete flowers, they are missing at least one of the above. What happens with some plants is that they actually have some flowers that have only the pistils or only the stamens. A good example of this is a pumpkin. If you look at a pumpkin flower, some of them will only have the pistils or the stamens. So that's going to be a case of incomplete flowers. There are even some plants in which the entire tree or the entire plant will only have male flowers or will only have female flowers. So the entire organism itself is male or female. Whereas the pumpkin, the whole vine, the one organism can have male and female flowers, but something like a ginkgo tree, you actually have male trees and female trees, where one of the tree will only have the flowers that have stamens, and then the other trees will be the ones that are fruiting. Sometimes this quirk of anatomy can be taken advantage of by only planting male trees in places where there are cities, because having the female trees means that you can also have lots of fruit that drop from the trees when season is right, and the dropping of the fruit means that there's a lot of cleanup that has to happen. And so this is particularly the case in the aforementioned ginkgo tree, because those fruits can be rather smelly. And so it can be unappealing to have those female trees be planted around places where a lot of people have to walk around, and tidying becomes a little bit more of a chore. Now, that's where I'm going to end this lesson, and I'll see you next time.